What if everything we've been told about autoimmunity is wrong? I'm Elizabeth Yarnell. After awakening partially blind one morning in 1999, a doctor told me my multiple sclerosis would put me in a wheelchair within 10 years. I refused to accept that as the end of the story, so I started investigating. Welcome to the Inflammation Investigator, the podcast that uncovers the inflammation lurking underneath your ailments. Because autoimmune and chronic conditions should not be viewed as death knells when they are actually alarm bells. I'm a traditional naturopath and founder of the Inflammation Academy. And in 2 episodes every week, we dig into what conventional medicine might be missing. If you're living with chronic or unexplained symptoms, this investigation is for you. Your body has been trying to tell you something. Let's start listening.
In the last episode, we talked about the symptoms of inflammation and how they might be showing up in your body and in your life. And in this episode, we're going to talk specifically about multiple sclerosis and inflammation. But remember that pretty much all autoimmune conditions will be the same when it comes to inflammation. So whether or not you think you have MS, or you know someone who has MS, or you know that you have a different autoimmune condition, this information will still be important to you. We're going to go a little bit heavy into some of the biology here again, and I will be reading, so don't be surprised when I look at my computer screen. There is no disputing that multiple sclerosis is a chronic inflammatory disease of the central nervous system, marked by flare-ups of inflammation that cause symptoms of pain, discomfort, and dysfunction. Inflammation is at the foundation of a case of MS, and it is inflammation and the damage it does to the myelin sheaths surrounding nerves that interrupts brain communication signals, resulting in a loss of normal motor or sensory functions. According to the report Brain Health, Time Matters in MS, multiple sclerosis affects 2.3 million people worldwide, and in many developed countries, it is the leading cause of non-traumatic disability among young and middle-aged adults. Chronic inflammation leads to loss of function and disability, whether or not it is diagnosed as multiple sclerosis. Whereas arthritis sufferers notice the pain and stiffness from inflammation in their swollen joints and their inability to bend fingers or legs freely, and glaucoma sufferers notice the pain and loss of vision clarity caused by inflammation in their eyeballs, the inflammation in multiple sclerosis is hidden deep inside the brain and along the spinal cord. The pain may be as diffused and generalized as fatigue, and the loss of abilities may be as focused as a dropped foot, trouble holding a pen, or blindness, like my case. While impossible to pinpoint without MRI scans of the brain and spinal cord, inflammation is at the core of every diagnosed case of MS. Indeed, most cases of chronic illness and ailments, whether officially diagnosed as autoimmune or not, have rampant inflammation in the background. As noted in the article, Inflammation in Multiple Sclerosis, published in Therapeutic Advances in Neurological Disorders, researchers recognize MS as an autoimmune disorder characterized by the activation of an immune response by as yet unknown triggers. Despite intense research, the authors admit, The underlying pathomechanisms driving inflammatory demyelination in MS still remain incompletely understood. In plain talk, this shows that MS researchers recognize inflammation is caused by triggers, but they haven't yet identified the triggers that set it off and direct it to damage the nervous system. Conventional medical care for multiple sclerosis exacerbations, commonly called flare-ups or simply flares, dismisses as yet unidentified triggers of inflammation and instead focuses on reducing current inflammation through pharmaceutical interventions. Treatment often begins with a multi-day course of intravenous corticosteroids, such as I received when I was first diagnosed. Corticosteroids, such as Solumedrol, are delivered through an IV drip for an intense dosage and work to reduce inflammation by suppressing the immune system so that it stops triggering inflammation. This medicinal approach to treatment may be substituted with or followed by a course of oral corticosteroids, such as prednisone, also intended to dampen or shut down the immune system's response in order to halt inflammatory activity and ease symptoms. While taking steroids reduces inflammation in the immediate time frame and thus may help alleviate the chances of long-term tissue damage, steroids are absolutely not recommended for long-term use for a variety of valid medical reasons, not the least of which might include bone loss, hardening of the arteries, vision degeneration, and digestive dysfunction. Additionally, this medication-focused approach doesn't resolve whatever underlying triggers are setting off the immune response in the first place. Simply taking prescribed steroids won't help you identify the things in your life that are keeping you inflamed. Even if you are already a meticulous grocery shopper who eats very cleanly in terms of organic, transparently sourced, and ethically produced foods, you may still be inadvertently keeping yourself in an inflamed state through your food choices, cleaning products, or personal care products. Here, I want to assure you that this is not your fault. It is not your fault that you have a chronic inflammatory condition, even if you are still eating the standard American diet of ultra-processed convenience foods. We weren't taught any differently, and it's almost impossible to suss out which of the potential hundreds of ingredients we're exposed to or consume in a typical 21st century day that could be triggering our symptoms. You might find yourself saying things such as, I know it couldn't have been this food that triggered my symptoms today because I didn't eat that food today and my symptoms still appeared. Or, I ate that today, but I also ate it yesterday and I was fine yesterday, so it can't be that food. Or, this other food is widely known to be a super healthy choice, so it can't be the problem. It's not your fault that you ended up here. But my hope is that from listening to this podcast, you'll be more aware of what you can do to identify and minimize your own exposures to potential triggers of inflammation. While it can be challenging, it is not impossible to figure it out. And no matter where in the world you are located, I have lots of resources to help you, from quizzes to handouts to courses to functional laboratory testing, and they're all collected at theinflammationacademy.com. As it turns out, some of what we think of as the healthiest foods could be the ones affecting you personally, keeping you trapped in an inflamed state of pain, discomfort, and/or dysfunction. For example, one of my own most inflammatory foods is lettuce. Lettuce! What could be more innocuous than lettuce? What could be healthier than a salad? Yet for me, eating lettuce can cause me to expand by 2 pant sizes overnight. Even worse, simply eating lettuce will cause inflammation that manifests in me as MS symptoms of imbalance and weakness in my legs. I first learned that I was reactive to lettuce more than a decade into my MS journey when I took the mediator release test, the MRT, and lettuce was rated reactive in my results. I diligently avoided lettuce and in time was able to confirm the sensitivity by witnessing a marked difference in my body when I did eat some. Like what happened a few years ago during a week of spring break skiing in Breckenridge, Colorado, together with my family and my sister's family, when I fell down on the mountain and, for the first time in 4 decades on skis, I couldn't get myself back up. We'd had 4 amazing days of skiing up to that point. It was a perfect Colorado day with intense yellow sunshine in an unbroken cornflower blue sky that, from our vantage point at the top of the chairlift at 12,000 feet, stretched across the mountain range and beyond. The snow had been plentiful, falling quietly during the night and shimmering promisingly each morning, making for my favorite spring skiing conditions of softly packed powder, bright sunshine, and warm temps. Our group of 6 gathered at the top of the slope before tipping our skis downhill. It was our first run of the day. I was at the rear of the group when I caught an edge of my ski, lost my balance, and went down. It wasn't a hard fall, and I didn't even lose a ski. If you've ever been downhill skiing, you know that learning how to get back up after falling is one of the first skills that must be mastered in order to participate in this sport. I had been skiing for more than 40 years, and I was more than capable of getting myself back up. Only I couldn't. I rotated my body so that my skis were across the slope rather than pointing downhill, planted my poles on the uphill side, and pushed myself back up and onto my skis in the usual manner. Only it didn't happen. My skis were positioned correctly. My poles were planted in the proper location. But suddenly it seemed my legs were too weak. I sat back, reviewed the procedure in my head, adjusted my skis and my poles to try again. Nope. I was not even close to successful. Now I was starting to tire. Fortunately, after some 10 or 20 minutes of struggle, just as I was starting to panic, a large man skied up and asked if I needed help. I don't remember exactly what was said, but I must have accepted his offer because he literally picked me up from the snow as if I were a child and set me back up on my skis and then skied away. I will be forever grateful to that kind stranger. Were it not for his help, I could have been stuck sitting in the snow on the side of that mountain for much, much longer. Back up on my skis, however, I immediately realized that I felt unsafe. Standing upright, my legs felt like jelly. Even though I had been skiing all over the mountain for the previous 4 days, and this was a run I knew very well, I had a flash of certainty that I needed to get off this mountain, off my skis, and off my feet as quickly as possible, or the next fall would be much worse. Cautiously, I eased myself down the hill, cradling my left thumb, which had been stretched backward when I fell. I felt like I had lost my mojo, my sense of myself. My legs were shaky and wobbly. I spent the rest of the day curled up in bed with an ice pack on my thumb, mystified as to why I was suddenly feeling so incapacitated when I had felt so strong and able the day before. When the others came back to the condo at the end of the day, I dragged myself out of bed and began pulling food from the fridge to assemble dinner for the group. I set a bowl of salad left over from the night before on the counter and stared at it for a full minute before it dawned on me. Oh no, lettuce. Lettuce! A friend had joined us for dinner the night before, and she had brought over a big, beautiful salad. It had looked so appetizing and gorgeous, and in the excitement of the moment, I had forgotten how lettuce triggers inflammation for me. I did not ski again that week. The damned inflammation had robbed me of my vacation. But fortunately, simply by returning to my regular anti-inflammatory habits, I felt like myself again within a few days. Just because lettuce is inflammatory for me, however, doesn't mean that lettuce is inflammatory for you. Inflammatory triggers are unique to each of us, and what might be inflammatory for me might be just fine for you, and vice versa. But if inflammation can be triggered by something as elemental as lettuce, what chance is there for identifying your own triggers and becoming uninflamed? It can be difficult, but rest assured that it is doable. Conventional wisdom tells us that 8 out of 10 MS patients will experience significant impairment within 10 years of diagnosis. Conventional medicine tells us that autoimmunity is idiopathic, or of unknown origin, meaning that doctors really don't know why some people become autoimmune while others don't. Conventional thinking tells us that autoimmunity is incurable and that our only options for finding enough relief to cope with day-to-day life is from pharmaceutical drugs with questionable side effects. Conventional thinking wants us to believe there's no option for long-term relief beyond artificial suppression of the immune system and/or pain management. And with any path that includes drugs to manage pain, possible addiction is added to the list of risky side effects. Although there's no cure for MS, therapies exist that can alter the disease course by reducing disease activity and slowing down the trajectory of disability. As the founder of the Fight MS with Food project, my team at the Inflammation Academy and I have been looking at the effects of a customized anti-inflammatory diet and other protocols on the progression of multiple sclerosis in already diagnosed patients. Since 2008, our goal is to halt the downhill slide of the typical MS patient by identifying and eliminating inflammatory triggers in both their diet and environment. Chronic inflammation happens when we are continually exposed to external triggers such as foods, chemicals, parasites, mold, heavy metals, or other substances that incite the immune response and cause inflammation in the body. Remember that every autoimmune disease, including multiple sclerosis, is characterized by chronic inflammation. Therefore, taking steps to identify and remove your triggers and thus avoid the inflammatory response to begin with should result in a life with fewer symptoms of pain, discomfort, or dysfunction. This is the foundation of anti-inflammatory disease management, and I believe these practices should be at the core of every healing journey. helplessly waiting for someone else to swoop in with a cure for what is eating away at your own body and destroying your own life, creates a ripe environment for feelings of victimhood and despair. Anti-inflammatory disease management is not a cure, but it does empower each of us to take actions to improve our own life. Anti-inflammatory disease management is a lifestyle of heightened awareness to potential threats and proactively striving to identify and avoid the triggers that activate inflammation in our own body. Anti-inflammatory disease management should be practiced whether or not you are taking a disease modifying therapy, a DMT, as you still need to eat and live in this world. If that sounds impossible and overwhelming, then please take a slow, deep breath and imagine what life would be like if you could reclaim control over your body. Picture living a life of your choosing, not hostage to a body that's inflamed and full of symptoms. Awareness plus sustained commitment, sprinkled with targeted efforts, can make this a reality for anyone wishing to rid themselves of the symptoms of chronic inflammation. The inflammation connection requires an understanding of inflammation as a characteristic of multiple sclerosis, autoimmune, or other chronic conditions. Inflammation is at the root of most symptoms of pain or discomfort. The inflammation connection is a paradigm shift in approaching disease management that focuses on identifying and eliminating the triggers of inflammation instead of on the symptoms themselves. My goal is to convince you that you have the ability within yourself to change your life simply by making choices in pursuit of avoiding potential inflammatory triggers. While it may be difficult to know for certain what triggers inflammation in your body, it is not as difficult if you first work to reduce the variables by avoiding the most likely triggers in what I call the windshield wiper approach. I will detail the windshield wiper approach in the coming episodes. I hope you tune in then.
And that's another case filed on the Inflammation Investigator. Remember, every symptom is your body's way of communicating. We just need to learn the language. If today's episode sparked something for you, I want to hear about it. Share your own investigation discoveries with me on social media at Elizabeth Yarnell, or find me at elizabethyarnell.com. Your experience could be exactly what another listener needs to hear. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And here's the thing about investigations. They work best when you're not going it alone. If this podcast is helping you uncover the answers you've been searching for, please like, rate, subscribe, and review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. As a new podcast, these actions mean more than you know. Want to dive deeper into your own inflammation investigation? Head over to inflammationinvestigator.com, where you can take my free inflammation quiz to uncover which hidden triggers might be affecting your health. Until next time, this is Elizabeth Yarnell, your inflammation investigator, reminding you that the solutions to your health issues are out there. Let's find them together.